And to my daughter Vanessa, who will receive nothing because that's exactly what she deserves, my father's digital image declared, his voice cutting through the speakers with surgical precision. They say funerals bring out the truth in families, but mine didn't wait for the eulogy. My truth arrived via pre-recorded video message before the lawyer even unlocked his tablet. I sat at the far end of the Harrington Estates home theater room, too far from the others to feel their presence but close enough to catch every uncomfortable shift in the silence. Smartphones pinged with notifications, relatives exchanged glances, someone muted their microphone. The tension in the room crackled more intensely than the electrical current powering the massive screen before us. Then my father's face appeared, filling the wall-sized display. Raymond Harrington. Silver hair meticulously styled, navy suit tailored like digital armor. The room and video chat fell silent, expectant. Everyone assumed he would deliver a dignified message before the lawyer began. A moment of respect, perhaps. Gratitude. Closure. Instead, he raised his crystal tumbler with that signature smile that never warmed his eyes. A toast delivered from beyond with calculated chill. To my son Ethan, he announced, voice steady and polished, who will lead the next chapter of our legacy. His gaze shifted slightly toward where he knew I'd be sitting but never quite met my digital self. And to my daughter Vanessa, who will receive nothing because that's exactly what she deserves. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. Sharp. Final. Public and now permanently archived. Gasps echoed through both the room and video feeds. My aunt dropped her champagne flute. Someone's unmuted microphone caught a muttered, "Jesus Christ." Even the house AI assistant seemed to pause its background operations. But me? I didn't flinch. I sat with my spine rigid, fingers calmly tapping notes on my tablet. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my expression remained composed, controlled. The slight smile on my lips wasn't performative. It was protective coding. Because I already knew. I'd understood long before he made it official that this wasn't simply a man writing his daughter out of a will. It was theater. A final power grab. A public execution served in 4K resolution and surround sound. Raymond Harrington never needed to raise his voice. The humiliation algorithm was his masterpiece, and today I was his display canvas. But what he couldn't comprehend, what his programming never accounted for, was that this moment, his moment, was the final one he'd ever control. He believed I logged in to witness his victory, but I was here to document his downfall. Growing up as Vanessa Harrington meant learning one lesson early: excellence had to be earned through relentless effort. Unless you possessed a Y chromosome. I did everything prescribed for worthiness. Perfect GPA. Student leadership positions. Dual doctorate from Stanford, MBA and environmental engineering. At 37, I stepped in when our company's legacy logistics division hemorrhaged revenue. I engineered a complete restructure, cut expenses by 30%, and transformed it into a profit center within 2 fiscal quarters. The board applauded politely. My father's acknowledgement came as a Starbucks gift card with a terse email, "Thanks." Meanwhile, Ethan, my brother, my father's golden child, flunked out of Princeton. Twice. His consolation prize? A corner office with Manhattan views and a Tesla Model S with the message to help realign your focus. My performance review the same week contained feedback that I was excessively intense, that I internalized business critiques, and that while my passion was commendable, perhaps I should adopt a more approachable communication style to be taken seriously in leadership discussions. Raymond Harrington couldn't recognize leadership in his daughter. Instead, he saw a liability. An unstable element. A woman with too much fire in her eyes to remain silent and too much intelligence to accept limitation. During family gatherings, he deliberately cut me off mid-sentence to ask Ethan about his latest golf tournament scores. In executive meetings, he'd comment on my outfit choice before dismissing my data-backed proposals. When I finally presented him with the sustainable supply chain initiative I'd spent 18 months developing, complete with ROI projections and implementation timelines, He barely glanced at the digital presentation before looking up with that patronizing smile. "You're a brilliant girl, Vanessa. But wouldn't your talents be better applied to something that might make you more wife material?" That moment triggered something fundamental in my system. Not my drive for excellence. Not my commitment to the company. Just the desperate need for his validation. Because I finally understood with crystal clarity that I could never inherit something that was coded to reject me. Not as a daughter. Not in his corporate empire. So I stopped trying to fit into his restrictive framework and began architecting something entirely my own. While Raymond Harrington viewed me as a threatening anomaly in designer heels, my grandfather Walter Harrington saw me through an entirely different lens, not as a daughter to control, not as a liability to manage, but as a capable mind with genuine potential. He would video call me from his hospital room, his tablet propped against medical equipment, and listen, truly listen, to my ideas, my concerns, my vision for transforming the company's future. During one of our encrypted chats, he told me, "The real issue with your father isn't doubt in your abilities. It's that he recognizes exactly how powerful you are, and that terrifies him to his core." At the time, I interpreted it as kindness. Perhaps indulgence. Now I understand he was issuing a warning. As his health deteriorated, I monitored his medication schedule through a shared app. Not Ethan. Not my father. Me. I managed his prescription delivery. I read him the Wall Street Journal articles twice when his memory failed. I laughed genuinely at his outdated jokes. I helped adjust his hospital bed when the nurses were understaffed. I maintained our video connection even when he occasionally couldn't remember my name. And one morning, during a moment of remarkable mental clarity, he looked directly into the camera and said, "My body may be failing, but my vision remains clear. I've watched what you've accomplished. I see who you truly are." That same day, he sent me an encrypted message with contact information for his personal attorney. Not the family legal team. Not the firm Raymond kept on retainer. Someone independent. Someone who could help him ensure the truth wouldn't be deleted. What I couldn't comprehend then was just how thoroughly he had safeguarded my future against erasure. They laid my grandfather to rest in a custom mahogany casket with gold accents, befitting the founder who built an empire from nothing. And then, through carefully controlled live stream and digital memorials, my father systematically buried the truth. The hybrid service reached maximum capacity both physically and virtually. Industry partners. Family members. Close associates. Board directors. Politicians in bespoke suits who owed my grandfather far more than ceremonial appearances. Everyone logged in to honor Walter Harrington. Everyone except me, in any meaningful way. My speaking request was unfortunately declined due to technical limitations. My name appeared nowhere in the digital program. I joined remotely from my home office dressed in black, silent, watching Raymond command the podium like a monarch addressing his subjects through the live stream that occasionally glitched whenever my video feed appeared. He cleared his throat, basking in the manufactured silence, then began his performance. My father was a visionary leader who valued discipline and unwavering loyalty. He believed in structured processes, organizational integrity, and most importantly, family continuity. My son Ethan will advance that vision into the future. Not a single mention of my name escaped his lips. Not one acknowledgement of my existence. I wasn't registered as a granddaughter. I wasn't recognized as a caregiver. I wasn't even granted the status of a digital footnote. Just a ghost file at the margins of the family system. That moment crystallized everything. This went beyond financial assets or corporate succession or wounded pride. Raymond wasn't merely disinheriting me, he was systematically deleting me from our family narrative. From the company archives. From our very genetic legacy. But I didn't interrupt the live stream. I didn't flood the chat with objections. Because I possessed information he didn't. I knew about the blockchain-secured directive. A digitally signed document. Biometrically verified. Timestamp certified. Waiting. So I remained silent in my video tile and watched him code his own obsolescence with every carefully crafted word. 14 days after the memorial service, the Harrington Estates home theater filled once again. But this time, the performative grieving had concluded. The real program was beginning. The attorney, Jackson Morris, positioned himself at the head of the conference table, 2 digital devices before him. One standard tablet, the other a specialized secure drive with encryption indicators glowing. Nobody registered the significance of the second device except me. I'd been relegated to the far corner again, beside a malfunctioning climate control vent, like a system error to be ignored. Ethan and my father commanded the central position, elbows resting on the polished mahogany, swirling aged bourbon as if already uploaded to their inheritance. Raymond adjusted his platinum cufflinks and stood, that practiced half-smile activating at the corner of his mouth. Before proceedings officially commence, he announced smoothly, raising his crystal tumbler yet again, "I'd like to propose a final acknowledgement of my son Ethan, who will guide Harrington Industries into its next evolution with distinction." He paused for calculated effect. Heads nodded in programmed response. Then his voice modulated lower, theatrically precise. "And to my daughter Vanessa, who unfortunately prioritized emotional impulse over company loyalty. May you find contentment wherever you ultimately land." Nervous laughter rippled at the room's perimeter. Strained. Uncomfortable. My aunt's gaze dropped to her smartphone screen. Jackson Morris blinked deliberately, then activated the first tablet. Standard asset distribution. Vacation properties. Art collections. Investment portfolios. I remained motionless, simply waiting for the inevitable deployment. He cleared his throat significantly and moved his hand toward the second device. Secured. Encrypted. Gold certification emblazoned. According to the late Walter Harrington's private and independently verified directive, he stated with measured precision, controlling interest in Harrington Industries, the family estate, and complete executive voting authority are to be transferred effective immediately to Vanessa Harrington. The shockwave was seismic. Ethan choked mid-swallow. Someone's glass shattered against the hardwood. My father's expression locked in suspended animation, eyes unblinking. I allowed myself a genuine smile. Because the entire system now responded to my authentication. The moment my name registered as the new controlling entity, everything reconfigured. Not just within that room, but throughout the entire power structure. But here's the reality, that pivotal moment wasn't random chance. It wasn't reactionary vengeance. It was strategic architecture. My father believed he'd raised a daughter he could program and contain. What he'd actually created was a master strategist. And this plan didn't initialize at the will reading. It began precisely when he dismissed my comprehensive business proposal, 6 months of research, sustainable innovation, and passionate commitment, as casually as a digital notification he could swipe away. "You're a brilliant girl, Vanessa," he said dismissively. "Why not focus your energy on skills that might enhance your marriageability?" I exited his office without protest, drove home, secured my apartment, and constructed a digital command center. I established Quantum Resilience Partners, an environmental tech LLC registered under a carefully selected alias. Joined sustainability forums he never monitored. Provided consulting services to emerging fintech companies. Began strategically investing in climate innovation startups with verified revenue models and significant market potential. I mastered the art of calibrating my voice to pleasant frequencies, keeping my smile precisely measured, concealing my ambitions behind conservative blouses and understated makeup. Through every family Sunday dinner, every executive meeting where I was expected to manage refreshments while Ethan presented half-developed concepts, I was continuously collecting data. Observing patterns. Running scenarios. When grandfather's health indicators began declining, my increased involvement wasn't motivated by inheritance calculations. I engaged because he deserved dignity. Because human worth transcends utility. Because I wanted to preserve the essence of the man who once told me during a late-night video call, Domination doesn't create genuine power, Vanessa, but precise understanding does. So when I detected Raymond cutting procedural corners, rushing medical authorizations, manipulating healthcare staff, maneuvering for medical power of attorney, I implemented countermeasures. I asked grandfather if he still trusted the corporate legal team. His negative response was immediate. I asked if he desired independent legal consultation. His affirmative was unequivocal. I established secure contact with Jackson Morris. Together we crafted a directive with impeccable specificity. Independent witnesses. Multiple cognitive capacity evaluations. Cryptographically secured. Legally unassailable. So when the encrypted file was decrypted, it wasn't an unexpected plot twist. It was a triggered protocol. A meticulously executed strategic sequence. Because I hadn't merely survived within the corporate architecture he attempted to exclude me from. I had systematically analyzed it. And then I engineered something more advanced. Initially, my father remained silent. Simply sat motionless, system shocked. Tumbler suspended midair. Expression frozen in processing failure. Ethan blinked rapidly as though his reality had suddenly inverted. Then the executive erupted. Raymond slammed his palm against the polished table surface. Everyone flinched involuntarily. "This is completely fraudulent," he snarled. "You manipulated a vulnerable elderly man. You exploited his cognitive decline." He pivoted toward Jackson Morris, voice escalating like approaching thunder beneath his carefully maintained control. "This directive is fundamentally invalid." He was medically compromised. His decision-making capacity was severely impaired. Morris maintained perfect composure. He calmly transferred a digital tablet across the table. Mr. Harrington underwent 3 separate independent neurological and cognitive assessments during the relevant time frame, he stated evenly. All confirmed full mental capacity. These amendments weren't merely legal, they were deliberate and extensively documented. The atmospheric pressure seemed to drop. My father's anger began fragmenting, not from strength but from escalating panic. He stood abruptly and began pacing, issuing disconnected objections to no particular target. "You don't comprehend what you've done, Vanessa. You lack the necessary experience. You'll destroy everything your grandfather constructed. This isn't some feminist empowerment fantasy. This is sophisticated global commerce." I allowed his emotional storm to run its course. I permitted the system to burn itself out. Then I rose deliberately, with measured confidence, and said, "I've been prepared for years, Dad. I simply stopped requiring your authorization to proceed." The room recalibrated into perfect stillness. For the first time in his existence, Raymond Harrington accurately identified what confronted him. Not a daughter. Not a disappointment. But a strategic equal. And I registered it in his expression. He recognized he'd already been outmaneuvered. The next morning, before Manhattan stirred to life, I positioned myself outside the towering glass entrance of Harrington Industries headquarters. No media announcement. No publicity team. No corporate communication blast. Just me, wearing a precisely tailored black coat, carrying a tablet loaded with frameworks nobody anticipated. My heels resonated against the marble flooring as I entered the building I'd known intimately since childhood. Years ago, I'd visit with my grandfather, holding his weathered hand in elevators that seemed impossibly vast to my younger self. Today, I was the one with complete access credentials. First destination, my grandfather's former executive suite. The corner office with panoramic city views and authority embedded in every square inch. I stepped inside, drew a deep breath, and immediately reconfigured the biometric security system. Not as symbolic gesture. As strategic necessity. Because I recognized Raymond wouldn't exit gracefully. He'd activate his network, leverage relationships, spread calculated misinformation throughout executive channels. But I was systematically eliminating all potential access points. Then I implemented Phase 1. Methodically, I scheduled individual virtual meetings with every department director. Not to issue directives, but to gather intelligence. I inquired about team morale metrics, burnout indicators, strategic vision alignment, the cultural dynamics beneath the performance data, the human elements my father never bothered to measure. And I documented everything digitally. Each conversation, every improvement initiative, all authorization signatures. Let him claim I lack experience, I thought while encrypting the files. Let him attempt to undermine my credibility. I'll have comprehensive verification. Because this wasn't about maintaining power structures. It was about fundamentally transforming them. He operated this corporation through intimidation, information suppression, and loyalty purchased with material incentives. But I hadn't arrived to preserve his legacy intact. I was here to reconstruct it into something more sustainable, more transparent, more innovative, more resilient. And the only effective approach? Enter the executive territory and remind the entire corporate ecosystem who truly directs the evolution. He strode in as though still retaining ownership authority. Raymond Harrington. Navy blazer. Gold cufflinks catching the light. Rehearsed smile, precisely calibrated. Ethan followed closely, radiating unearned confidence, clutching a presentation folder as if it contained salvation. Perhaps it did, just not the version they projected. The hybrid boardroom had reached capacity. Every physical seat and virtual tile occupied. C-suite executives. Senior partners. Legacy shareholders. All eyes tracked his entrance, and Raymond delivered his practiced performance. "Gentlemen," he announced, deliberately avoiding my direction entirely, "let's address damage mitigation strategy." I maintained strategic patience. Allowed him this momentary illusion of control. The simulation of authority remained temporarily unchallenged. He clapped Ethan's shoulder approvingly and claimed his former position at the head of the conference table as though leadership transfer had never occurred. As though the digital infrastructure beneath him wasn't already being systematically reconfigured. "We've completed preliminary impact assessment," he stated briskly. "Minimal media coverage thus far. With immediate intervention, we can rectify market confusion. Vanessa's appointment can be repositioned as temporary transitional leadership." I activated my microphone. "This isn't a damage control discussion," I stated with measured authority. "This is a comprehensive restructuring session." The statement immediately recalibrated everyone's attention. I shared access to secured digital folders, individually configured for each board member's authentication. Contents: meticulously documented evidence. Financial misconduct under Raymond's leadership. Offshore banking transactions. Unauthorized investments in shell corporations registered to non-existent physical addresses. Then Ethan's file appeared on screen. Systematic misappropriation of corporate resources for personal expenditures. Premium airline upgrades. A company-financed yacht celebration in Ibiza documented through his own social media posts. The digital silence was absolute. Raymond opened the digital folder. His jaw visibly tightened. Ethan's complexion drained completely. "This is entirely fabricated," my father insisted, voice strained. "None of this evidence has any validity. Every document is independently verified," I responded calmly. "Authenticated by an external compliance consortium. The board will now proceed with the digital vote." Ethan stood abruptly, nearly toppling his chair. "You illegally accessed my private communications. This constitutes criminal activity." "It's called corporate governance," I corrected him. "Welcome to actual accountability." The electronic voting wasn't remotely contested. It wasn't even marginally divided. Unanimously decisive. Ethan, immediately removed from all system access. Raymond, permanently prohibited from company operations, effective within minutes. Their biometric credentials were deactivated before the meeting concluded. I personally escorted them to the elevator bank, and as the doors began sliding closed, Raymond turned toward me, voice lowered with barely contained rage. You believe this represents conclusion? I leaned slightly forward. No. I recognize this as merely initialization. He was positioned outside the corporate headquarters as if still belonging there. No private car service. No executive entourage. No designer accessories or practiced power stance. Just Raymond Harrington, shoulders visibly contracted beneath a rumpled overcoat, gazing upward at the corporate empire that no longer responded to his commands. I nearly continued walking, but just before the automatic glass doors sealed behind me, I turned back. He appeared diminished somehow, as if physically deflated. As if the towering structure he once dominated had proportionally reduced him to ordinary human scale. Good morning, Dad, I said with calm clarity. As the saying goes, excessive pride invariably precedes significant downfall. He offered no verbal response. None was necessary. Because this moment transcended revenge or retaliation. That phase had concluded. This was about natural consequences. For decades, he had constructed his legacy through intimidation. Through enforced silence. Absolute control. Perfectly polished deceptions in perfectly tailored suits. He ensured his voice was the only one amplified in executive meetings, family gatherings, and even within my own internal dialogue. But now, his pronouncements carried no authority. His signature granted no access. His corporate empire remained standing, but no longer represented his personal domain. I felt no need for triumphant declarations. No compulsion to say I predicted this outcome, because his expression communicated complete understanding. He finally recognized what I had become. Not a disappointment. Not an emotional liability. But a woman who transformed everything he withheld into something more resilient. Something whose value existed independent of his validation. As I turned to re-enter the building, past the reception desk where I was now greeted as Ms. Harrington, I realized he never anticipated this reversal because he never elevated his perspective beyond his presumed permanent position to notice someone quietly ascending beyond his reach. I organized no celebration. No champagne toast. No media photoshoot. No victorious address from the executive floor. Because this wasn't about conquest. This was about systematic correction. In the subsequent days, I worked with unprecedented intensity. I restructured departmental hierarchies. I implemented zero-tolerance policies addressing financial misconduct, nepotism, and workplace intimidation. I engaged with employees who had never previously been consulted and actively listened to their perspectives. I replaced covert information channels with transparency protocols. Established leadership development programs specifically targeting overlooked female talent. Enhanced parental leave benefits. Recruited fresh perspectives. Diverse. Motivated. Previously undervalued expertise. Because this organization wasn't merely mine to possess. It was mine to rehabilitate. Financial news outlets characterized it as a calculated takeover. Daughter deposes CEO father in stunning corporate revolution. But their headlines missed the fundamental truth. This wasn't about personal vengeance. It was about necessary extraction. Of systemic corruption. Of organizational trauma. Of the dangerous fiction that effective leadership must resemble Raymond Harrington's model. One evening, I arrived home well after dinner, still wearing my professional heels, still gripping my smartphone, and quietly checked on Oliver in his bedroom. He was already nestled under his covers, blanket partially pushed aside as usual. His drowsy eyes blinked up at me through the soft glow of his dinosaur nightlight. "Mom," he murmured sleepily, "why was Grandpa's face so angry on your tablet today?" I paused momentarily. Smiled gently. Because, I explained softly, brushing his sandy hair away from his forehead, he never truly understood that women can lead companies just as effectively as men. He nodded with childhood wisdom, already drifting back toward sleep, this new understanding settling naturally into his developing worldview. In that quiet moment, I experienced a profound realization. Raymond had fundamentally misidentified the inheritance. He believed it was the corporate entity, the board control, the architectural structures, the nameplate on the executive suite door. But his assessment was critically flawed. The true inheritance was embodied in me, the daughter he attempted to erase from the narrative, the strategist whose abilities he consistently undervalued, the woman who reconstructed the enterprise under her own leadership principles. And this iteration would not be founded on blind compliance or intimidation tactics. It would be built on authentic purpose. For my son's future. For the professional I had become. For every woman who'd been instructed to minimize her ambitions. The initial weeks following the leadership transition passed in a concentrated blur. Strategy sessions. Digital authorizations. Media coverage. Recalibrated interactions with colleagues who previously looked through me as if I were transparent. Now they addressed me as Ms. Harrington. Now conversations paused expectantly when I entered virtual meetings. Yet occasionally, during quiet evening hours, the lingering questions surfaced. The persistent ache. That internal voice questioning, would his treatment have fundamentally differed if I'd been born male? Was there any potential reality where he would have positioned himself beside me rather than obstructing my path? I couldn't answer with certainty. I still can't. Because emotional healing doesn't arrive with the predictable timing of a contract execution or board vote. It emerges unpredictably. Sometimes awkwardly. Without formal announcement. Much like the unexpected package delivered to my office during a rainy afternoon. No return identification. No postage indicators. Just my name handwritten in immediately recognizable but slightly trembling penmanship. Inside, a single photograph. Vintage. Well handled. Slightly damaged at the corners. It captured me at approximately age 5, perched happily on my father's shoulders during a company summer gathering. My expression pure childhood joy. His hands supporting me as something irreplaceable. On the reverse side, written in faded blue ink, for simple words, "You always had it." Nothing more. No formal apology. No signature. No explanatory context. And for the first time in countless years, I discovered I required none. I carefully placed the photograph in my desk's top drawer, alongside the corporate authentication credentials. Not as a reminder of him, but as evidence of my journey. The girl who once believed paternal validation determined her inherent value, and the woman who discovered her power existed independent of his recognition. Because ultimately, the genuine inheritance wasn't control of the boardroom. It wasn't possession of the enterprise. It was the internal spark he attempted to extinguish. And I mastered its sustainable transformation into lasting illumination.